right. So, welcome everybody to our fall OLLI class on near death and spiritually transformative experiences. And today we have a beautiful guest with us. Her name is Libba Phillips. And Libba is an intuitive life coach, author, and speaker whose spiritual awakening began more than 20 years ago when her sister disappeared and her beloved grandfather passed away. Out of that heartbreak came an unexpected gift, undeniable signs and messages from angels and loved ones in spirit that changed the course of her life. Guided in her darkest time to real and tangible outcomes, Libba now shares her story to remind others that divine support is not only present in extraordinary circumstances, but also available in the everyday moments of life. So I just want to say thank you, Libba, for being here with us and welcome. I'm so happy that you're here to share your story today.
Oh, thank you. It's a big honor to be here. I'm thrilled to be here. Um, are most of you in the New York area? Okay,
Yes.
so you will hear my Southern accent come out. Don't hold it against me. I live right now in Tampa, Florida, but I grew up in the South, and I also lived in California for a time. So I may take you on a little trip when we talk today. So if you hear that, you'll know.
Start wherever you feel comfortable.
Okay. So I'll have to take you back almost 30 years. And just to give you a reference of time, I'm 57. And when I was 30, I, I was not who I am today. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. I was in a business suit. I carried a briefcase every day. I would go call on doctors and I would try to get them to carry whatever pharmaceutical my company was promoting at the moment. And life to me was very logical, you know. Um, that all changed. I'm willing to bet that probably everybody in the room has had one of those moments in your life where you thought you were doing one thing and you thought you were thinking one way, and then life kind of knocked you upside the head, and all of a sudden everything you thought you knew was not it. Is there anybody in here that can relate to that? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so everything changed for me when I got a phone call that my younger sister Ashley had disappeared. And back in those days, Ashley was already struggling with her mental health. She was also struggling with a drug addiction. And it wouldn't have been that uncommon for her to, go on a bender or something like that for a day or two. But she was in her early 20s. And so what was really quite shocking about the event was that she actually was in a mental health facility when she went missing. And the insurance at the time dropped her. And without informing my family, they just let her out onto the streets. So by the time the news found me, my mom had already, and my mom and my stepdad had already tried to do what you think you would do. Like, you have a loved one who goes missing, you're going to call the police, you're going to file a missing persons report. And in today's day, you might have social media and Facebook and searches and candlelight vigils. None of those things happen. Instead, my family was met with just really sort of a callous attitude by the police. They said, if your sister's crazy on the street, she really has a right to that, to be that and do that. If she gets caught using drugs, then it's our problem. So we were not successful in getting a missing persons report filed. So before I go too far down the story, I'll just tell you right now that was how it was for about 4 years. So immediately, I got on a plane. I was in Sacramento, California. Like I said, I was in my sales rep mode. And sales rep mode is, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to go talk to the police officers. I'm going to tell them everything I know. They're going to take the report, right? Then I'm going to get on the news, and we're going to get my sister back. Because, I was used to walking into doctor's offices every day, getting past a gatekeeper, speaking to someone, that really, it didn't really occur to me that this was not a problem we couldn't solve. And I was really in for a rude awakening, got the same response that my parents did. And so there wasn't social media. This was back in 1998. So there really wasn't Instagram or, all the things that you see now, and it was more like, I mean, this is the best way I can paint the picture. It was more like if you have a missing pet, you again, you don't have Facebook, you could put it on now, but you're making your own flyers. We're making our own flyers. We're tacking them up on telephone poles. We're going into convenience stores. We're going to locations that we thought she may have been seen. We're starting to go to homeless shelters. My days begin, instead of with a cup of coffee and my sales report, they begin with like calling morgues. Do you have any unidentified Jane Does? And in those days, it's all changed now. Well, I'll get to that part, but in those days, I didn't know what that really meant. Like, what's an unidentified Jane Doe? So if you live in the New York area, you know about Potter's Field, you know about, unidentified people being buried there. I didn't have an awareness of that world. And, going out and looking for someone on the streets who is not well, who's off the grid, who's vulnerable, who's a young woman, you don't have to watch, a crime, CSI on TV to kind of figure out what will happen to a young woman like that on the streets. But it really wasn't safe, even for me or my mom or my stepdad, to look for her. But we did. I mean, that's what we needed to do. And you quickly find out the currency on the streets are things like rolled up dollar bills and cartons of cigarettes, and going out at 1 or 2 in the morning and not in the broad daylight. So it was a crash course in a reality I had no understanding of. And so that despair and that shock just really quickly became my new normal. And I should tell you that prior to all this, like I said, I was a sales rep. Life was logical to me. You have a goal, you have steps, you reach your target. But I didn't really have any faith. I didn't really believe in anything bigger than myself. When Ashley and I were growing up, we had a very difficult childhood. We had a very dysfunctional, violent home, and there weren't many stable adults around. But the loves of my life were, and still are, my grandparents, my granddaddy Bob and my grandmother Joyce. And any time that I got to spend with them, like, for a weekend or part of the summer, that was a reprieve for me. And my granddad was a minister. So I know we have a rabbi in the group. My granddad was a minister. So, like, I grew up in the Episcopal Church, but, it didn't really mean anything to me. It was more like, okay, well, God exists. Maybe, like, by proxy, I'll get in because my granddad, he'll put in a good word for me. I didn't really think about it. It wasn't top of mind for me as a child, and it really wasn't for me as an adult. When my sister disappeared, my family was also going through another difficulty, and my granddad was dying of colon cancer. And I was really actually considered God kind of a friend of me. I was pretty pissed about that he was dying, because I'm thinking, wow, if you exist, this guy really makes you look good. I mean, I grew up listening to my granddad, preach. And because my granddad, like, he never knew a stranger. People wouldn't realize that they'd been ministered to, and the grocery store checkout line, because that's just the kind of guy he was. He was just so friendly and loving. And so when he was dying, my mom called me to come back to the East Coast where he was, and say my final goodbyes. And this is another one of those defining moments. At first I thought, you know, life is really bad. Like things are hard, and my sister's missing, and now my granddad is dying. And I really don't think God is in this equation anywhere. But my granddad said to me, I want to pray with you before I go. And I'm thinking, this is to myself, I'm thinking, man, I'm just going to indulge in old man's prayers, right? I don't think the God he's talking to is listening because he's suffering. I'm suffering. I've got to get back to my sales manager who's, on me about missing work for all this travel back and forth to try to find my sister. But I indulge him. And if any of you are grandparents, that love between your grandchildren and your grandparents, I'm telling you, it's something that I would have moved any mountain to get to that bedside just to hear that final prayer. So he takes my hands and he says, Libba, I know that Ashley's missing. And I know you have questions. And wherever she is, God knows. I'm trying not to roll my eyes, right? Like I'm trying to give him all of my love and respect in the moment. And he says, everybody has a purpose. And when I get there, I'm going to see about that. And those were his final words to me. He died the next day. I had to get on a plane, go back to Sacramento, get back to work. But those words just stayed with me. And that's when life got kind of weird. I started to dream about my grandfather. I thought, okay, that's, comforting. But, that's a grieving brain, right? Of course, I'm going to think about him. He made me a promise. Maybe he can like send me a sign or something that he's on the other side. I don't really know how this works. So at that point, let's see, my sister had gone missing that spring. By this time, it's late July. So it's been a number of months that we're doing this daily routine of calling the morgue, my parents going out on the streets, me coming back and forth from Sacramento, California to Tampa, Florida to help them look for my sister. I still can't get on the news. I can't get any news media, to take anything seriously because Ashley's not listed as missing. Like, can you imagine, you're trying to call the news, you're trying to get on the news, and they're like, okay, but where's the, statement from the police? What clues have you had? It's a whole thing. And they just thought I was not someone to be taken seriously. So I had a lot of moments where I was really questioning. And one of these days I was having a meltdown. I'll be honest, those were quite often. I was driving in my big company car. Now I'm short. I'm about 5'2". Okay, you can imagine. At the time I had this Dodge Intrepid. Okay, those things are like a land yacht. All right, and I'm driving. I'm trying to get to my sales call. I'm thinking about everything. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm at a stoplight, and I say, God, are you there? Like, are you there? Do you know what's going on? I use some other choice words, but since we're recording, I won't share those. My granddad's there. Like, have you met him? Have you guys been talking at all? Because this is not working. Like, I need to know that Ashley matters to you, and I need something now. And in that moment, not 2 seconds later, a giant truck comes through the intersection. My hands are on the wheel, my jaw is dropping. And on the side of the truck, from the bottom of the trailer to the top, is one word. And it's spelled Ashley. It's Ashley. Like Ashley Furniture. Ashley. Okay. I don't know how long I sat there. The person behind me starts honking the horn. And I'm going, like I'm thinking, oh my God, did God just answer me? Did somebody's hearing me? Okay, so I'm thinking, by the time I get down to like the next couple of lights, I'm talking myself out of it. This can't be happening. Is this really happening? What does it mean? I'm crying. So I decide to pull over. I pull into a parking lot. There's a grocery store, not a grocery, like a grocery store and like a drugstore, like a Rite Aid or CVS or something. It's a good place to have a big cry. And I'm crying. And I'm like, okay, well, while I'm here, I'm just going to go in. I got to get some few things anyway, toothpaste, shampoo. And I just say, okay, God, like I try to like dare the universe. At that time, I was bold because, I was angry and I was a little bit upset about everything going on. So I didn't think I had anything to lose. And I said, okay, I don't know if any of this is real, but like, again, God, granddad, angels, like, are you more than those little porcelain cherubs on my mom's bookshelf? Because like I need like more, like a sign, what we would say a signier sign. I need more, right? So I walk into the drugstore and there's music playing over the intercom. Now I don't sing, but I will subject you to this for just a minute. The opening line of a song by a band called Train is Calling All Angels. And the opening line is, I need a sign that you are here, you know, and I'm going, so there I am, like I'm like on aisle 9, I'm crying, I'm getting my shampoo, and I'm thinking, okay, this is something. Like this is something. And these are the kinds of things that start happening to me. So I would call those, like, now, I didn't have a word for it then. I would call those things that were like, they were comforting, like that was like, okay, something is occurring. There is today I would say the universe is responsive. In those days, I would not say that. I would say, I said something's happening. But things weren't necessarily getting any easier. You know, there were still Jane Does in the morgue that weren't my sister. There were still unsolved homicides in Sacramento and in Tampa that sometimes we thought, could that be her? There were a lot of really difficult realities I was being subjected to. I should mention that my sister did live with me for a short time in Sacramento. That's why whenever there was a body that turned up where I lived, I made friends with the local police there. They were not the police that turned us down. The police that turned us down for missing persons report was in Tampa because that's where she initially went missing. But I got to be friends with the local police in Sacramento, and I got to be friends with one of their forensic investigators. And, they really started to educate me a lot. I learned that at that time, there were over 40,000 unidentified John and Jane Does just in the country alone. And people, would ask me, who are these people? And that's the question I was asking, who are they? They could be somebody's homeless brother that had schizophrenia. They could be, somebody that was estranged from their family or friends. It could be like a runaway from a group home, So I started to notice, like, as I was out there looking for my sister, I was also seeing a bigger issue. And I was meeting other people that were looking for their lost loved ones. And I called all of these other advocacy agencies. So you probably heard of John Walsh, National Center for Missing Exploited Kids. I called them. Hey, can you list my sister's missing? Well, she was an adult. They said, no, call the National Center for Missing Adults. So at the time, we don't have that group anymore, National Center for Missing Adults. But at the time, they were based in Arizona. I'll call them. I said, hey, can you list my sister's missing? And they said, oh, do you have a missing persons report? And by that time, like, I knew all the things. I knew, like, what's an NCIC number? That's a big database where you can report a missing car, a missing person, a stolen, vehicle, that kind of stuff. And they said, no, if you don't have a missing persons number, we can't officially take the report because that's like, an invasion of somebody's privacy. And I'll say, listen, I'm knocking on all these doors. We're going to homeless shelters. And they're telling me, I can't tell you if your sister's here or not. I'm like, why can't you tell me that? because that's an invasion of her privacy. Like, I don't know if you're going to hurt her or somebody's, so there was like, you're beating your head against the wall. Um, and then the other people that you're meeting um, are telling you the reality, people that will talk to you, not necessarily kindly. People on the street are telling me, if your sister's still alive, she doesn't look like that picture you have, the picture of the flyer you have. She would be in a drug house. They would be trafficking her. They would be using her. You better just forget about her. That's the kind of hope that we had was non-existent. So I'm still thinking, I'm like, okay, these signs are really cool, but like I need to get on the news. I need something tangible. But I could not mistake this feeling that I was having. Have you ever had like one of those feelings like you got to do something? You don't know why you got to do it, but you got to do it. It's not impulsive. It's like a directive. It's like an intuitive nudge, like turn left or stop, even though the light is green. It was like that. And it was you need to start a website for other people who are in the same situation as you. Your sister can't be listed anywhere, but you can list her somewhere. You can gather information, and the information that you're finding, you can put it somewhere. And I started to document what I was finding out on the streets. Anybody that would talk to me would ask them, could I film them? I actually interviewed a coroner in Sacramento, explain to me about this unidentified Jane Doe thing and why this is such a problem in the country. And so I knew that, or felt that, I was being directed somehow to start something. I mean, I didn't have like the background or education to do that. I had my sales experience, so I had just enough knowledge to maybe put something together in some logical way. Don't ask me to do an Excel spreadsheet because that's not going to happen. But I could put information together, in some way that maybe it would make sense to somebody in the future. I still needed to get on the news. I wasn't having luck getting on the news, and so in the dream time, I was still seeing my granddad. And then I was feeling the presence of something more. I'd feel him in my car. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going nuts. I'm feeling crazy. And I started to have an understanding that angels were not just the porcelain cherubs on my mom's bookshelf. I started to, for lack of a better word, hear or have, I didn't have a word for it then. Now I would say like a download or like a knowing. And I kept hearing, you need to get in front of Jennifer Smith. Now, Jennifer Smith was a big deal in Sacramento in those days. She was a news anchor for Channel News 10. She had this trademark red suit, and she had this really beautiful brunette hair and this bright red lipstick. If she was speaking, you were listening. She just commanded a room. And I just couldn't get it out of my head that this was somebody I needed to get in front of. And I thought, I'm still don't have this missing persons report, right? And so nobody at the news stations are taking me seriously. And back then, like, we're sending faxes. Remember that? You send a fax, so we're sending like faxes with information. So I would type up a story, like, this is what happened to my sister. This is why we need to be on the news. She's endangered. She's vulnerable. She's on the streets. She's out of her mind. She's at risk. And, the days have turned into weeks, have turned into months, started to turn into a couple of years at that point. But life goes on. So one day I look at my calendar and I see that I have a doctor's appointment on the schedule. So I go to the doctor's appointment. I really don't want to be there. I'm just thinking to myself, let me just get in here and get in and out of here, get going. I'm in danger of losing my job. I'm just, my attention is not on making my sales. And the doctor says to me, how's everything going? And have you ever had that happen? Like, you're at the grocery store and somebody says, well, how are you doing today? And you're thinking, do I tell them the truth? Or do I just say, oh, everything's good, and you just walk out? So I just say, hey, what do I have to lose? So I told her the truth. And I said, well, I'm not doing that great. Don't write me a prescription for that. But my sister's missing. And I'm having a really hard time focusing on my life. And I'm having some other kind of weird things happen to me. I wasn't going to tell her that because, I wanted her to let me out of the doctor's office. And she said, well, what do you need? I said, well, I need to get on the news. And she said, well, like, who are you thinking about? Like, who, which station? Like, have you talked to? And she started listing all the, and I'm thinking, lady, you don't know who I haven't talked to, right? And I'm just kind of got that snarky attitude in my mind. And I said, well, I really would love to get in front of Jennifer Smith, but I don't think that's going to happen. So she does like this. She takes her glasses down and she looks at me and she says, well, Jennifer Smith is my best friend. And we go to church together. And I'm thinking, oh, what? I feel this sort of this rush come through my body, right? Through the bottoms of my feet and through my arms, and tears spring to my eyes. And she says, listen, I can't promise you anything, okay? But if it's okay with you, when you leave here, I'm going to give her a call because I think your story needs to be told. And your sister needs to be reported as missing. So after the appointment, I walk out of there and I have this feeling of hope. I walk into the elevator. I'm crying. I go down to the bottom floor. I walk out to the parking lot. I get in my car and I say, that was weird. Please do not dangle this carrot in front of me without something. Like this feels like something. Like this feels like directional, right? So I need, please don't let me down, like I'm begging almost. I pull out of the parking lot, I get onto the frontage road, and as I'm getting onto the highway, this giant city bus comes right next to me. You know how buses sometimes have like a big wrap? And it's got the big giant face of Jennifer Smith in her trademark red suit and her very cute brunette hair and her I'm talking to you look. And I mean, I have to pull back over because I'm crying again. I'm like, okay, okay. I'm listening. I'm paying attention. I get home. I park my car. I walk in. I check my voicemail. It's Jennifer Smith, and yours truly is on the news that weekend. So that's when it all started to change for me. And I started to realize, okay, I'm being guided. Something more is happening than what I could see. Now, if I had known at that point, we're a few years in, if I had known I'd have a lot more years to go, I probably would have said, no, thanks, try somebody else, right? But I just had enough, like breadcrumbs, right? Just a few breadcrumbs to help me go. It wasn't like, oh, you're on the spiritual path and here's some roses in front of you and glitter and everything is great. No, it wasn't like that at all, right? It was still very dark and despairing. And to find out what was happening to women and children on the streets was devastating. And all I could do was record it. All I could do was witness it. And we were on wild goose chases still. We would get tips sometimes from strangers. Never, by the way, never put your own personal phone number on any missing persons flyer. I can guide you in that stuff if you ever, hopefully you'll never have that issue. But so these things were happening. And it took about, like I said, it took 4 years and we finally got the missing persons report file. Now, by that point, Ashley's gone, gone with the wind. There's no tangible anything. And like I said, we would get tips. We would sometimes get information. Some of it would pan out, some of it wouldn't. It's a whole underground when you have people like that who are on the streets, and people don't necessarily stay in one area. And I was learning that the definition of a success story for somebody else that was coming to us that would have a missing person, they wanted to be listed. The organization at that time was called Outpost for Hope. And, sometimes a success story was that a mother knew that her son with schizophrenia was alive and sleeping in the park. Sometimes it meant we could put a name to a John Doe that had been a cold case for 20 years, right? So there were different different ways that we had to define success story. We still didn't really have one of our own. So over time, I would really listen to guidance. I learned to listen. I learned to listen to those downloads. Ultimately, with the help of the heavenly realm, I did find myself in People magazine a couple times, Reader's Digest a couple times. And again, I was still trying to make a recording of all this. I was making the documentary with my friend, my best friend at the time. But, my life imploded. And the marriage that I was in at that time, right along with it. And I made a decision that I would move back to the East Coast and I would start over because, I just didn't want to keep doing the cross country trips, and looking for my sister. And so I started my life over. At this point, I was 40. Yeah, I was 40. And it goes fast. And I reconnected with my childhood best friend, who's now my husband. And all of a sudden, I found out I was pregnant. And I was like, oh, this is a surprise. I'm 40. Didn't think that was going to happen. And I jokingly, I just said to God, hey, I've been making this documentary film. We're going on about 10 plus years now at this point, with Ashley being out there somewhere. And if this really matters to you, I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be able to do the advocacy work. It was a labor of love at that point. I was still, working, and I need help. And I don't know, you know, like in my mind, I'm thinking, if I could just get this documentary film done, maybe I could go to Sundance, maybe it would win an award, maybe we could change a law, like that's my idea, right? So I don't know if you've ever like told God your ideas, but sometimes um, something better comes back. Sometimes, it's confusing as to what comes back. Sometimes maybe you don't know what's coming back, or maybe you don't have that belief. But by that time, I had some belief. And so I said, I need a way to tell the story because I'm finding out all this other stuff that's happening out there. And I think it's important. And I think that there's a perception of people who are on the streets. Now, not every homeless person is somebody's lost loved one, but a lot of them are. And not every person that's on the streets is mentally ill, but a lot of them are. And all we have to do is look at today's healthcare situation, and we can see that the needle has not moved a lot, right, in almost 30 years. So I wrote it down, what I needed, or what I thought I needed, what I wanted. God is not an ATM, but I was like, okay, this has worked for some other things. Let me see. So I wrote it down. And 3 days later, and I said, I don't have the money to finish this documentary. Now I'm not living anywhere near my best friend who's helping me with this film. And I've got all this footage is sitting in a safe, but I don't have the wherewithal to put it together. But again, I think it's important. And if you do, then I'm going to turn it over to you. So 3 days later, I get a call, and it's a producer, and they say, hey, we saw your story in People magazine, and we want to make a Lifetime movie. Now, my first thought was, Lifetime? No, I don't think so. But then I said, let me think about it, and I'll call you back. I started thinking about it, and I called the producer back, and I said, tell me what you have in mind. And they said, well, you'll be the story consultant. We will only share what you tell us. And I said, well, there's some privacy concerns. I want to keep certain names private, things like that. I don't want my family to, I want this to be done in a tasteful way. And so a few years later, the movie was greenlit. And that movie was called Bringing Ashley Home. And it aired in over 30 countries around the world. And it did more for perception than I ever could on my own, more than any documentary that I could have ever done by myself. And I think that was the most astonishing thing to me, was realizing that the divine partnered with me. Like this, like the first thing I got was, we're always helped. And that's what I hope you would walk away from today's talk with, is having a knowing, or maybe even more of a belief maybe than you already have, that we're always helped. We have to be open to what that looks like though, right? That was my lesson. And the second thing is sometimes we are how the divine helps other people. And the movie, in its 89 minutes, and there was some silly stuff in there too, like they portrayed me getting married and running off to Las Vegas and stuff. There were some things in there that were, but they got the essence right. And they changed some names, but they were only able to capture the first 4 years of our search in that 89-minute movie. The experience of looking for my sister would last almost 27 years. And so that movie did air, and a lot of those Lifetime movies or Hallmark movies, they have a shelf life of about 10 years. So it aired for about 10 years in over 30 countries. And, during all of those years, we had Ashley back for a very brief time. We got her back for about a year. She also had a baby. She was pregnant. And that really upped the game for me. I used to be a person that would think, about somebody that was struggling with addiction or whatever. I would say, oh, they got to hit rock bottom. I still believe that. And when it's someone that's on the streets that's dealing with a mental health issue, and it's a woman and there's children involved, there's a lot of darkness out there. I will just say this: the lion always looks for the weakest prey, right? That's the oldest law of the jungle. The same law applies to our streets. So we have a lot of vulnerable people on the streets, and trafficking is a real thing. It's a real thing. And when you have somebody that you love that's vulnerable and out there, and you don't know where they are, you don't know if they're having kids or not. There was a study that was done actually in New York about homeless women, and I don't know the exact numbers, but the numbers were startling, for how many kids and pregnancies and things like that are being had, because, these are women that are being raped and things like that. So, but, those realities were still very, very present for us. But I knew then that, let's see, how can I put this in a way it doesn't sound like a Hallmark card, right? It's, this wasn't happening to me. It was happening through me, that there was something bigger, like what I wanted, right? Like if somebody said, hey, what's your intention, right? Or if you're thinking about, a prayer, what's the outcome you're wanting with it? What I wanted was, I wanted my sister back. I wanted her healthy. I wanted her safe. I wanted to know where she was. What I got though was shining the light on something that was bigger than me, didn't exactly get what I wanted, but I got whatever I was uniquely equipped for, right? So that's been my journey. And ultimately, over the course of those years, I did leave my pharmaceutical job. I realized that life was not always just logic and Excel spreadsheets. Thank God for that. And a few years ago, came out of the spiritual closet. So my own intuitive abilities awakened during this time. I know that God, or the divine, or however you want to define that, exists. I don't necessarily subscribe to Episcopalian or anything else. For all I know, Jesus and Buddha are having a cup of coffee somewhere. I don't really know. I'm open to it. And I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm an intuitive life coach. So now I help other people co-create, partner with the divine. I help people to navigate their own challenges with the help of the divine, and discover their own purpose. And I have to say, probably one of the most remarkable things for me is, when I was a kid, I didn't have this very loving, secure childhood like a lot of people. That's not really a far-fetched reality for many people. But I didn't realize how much that experience really sort of blocked my belief in this loving, supportive more, right? Like I just didn't have that. So I didn't really put it together like, oh, I didn't have that, therefore I don't believe that. Right. But my granddad and my grandmother, they were, like I said, they were the loves of my life. They still are. That my granddad reached across time and space and made good on his promise like a loving dad. To me, was everything. And that's what's so remarkable, even to me now. It never ceases to amaze me when I think about it or talk about it, is our loved ones. Like love does not know any distance. And, people that think that, oh, maybe their next chapter is they're going to heaven. They think, oh, I'm going to get some rest from this earthly plane. Nope, there will be no resting on clouds for any of us. You may be put to work. And, you know, it's remarkable. My granddad has come through for me. I mean, I can talk to him anytime, but he has actually come through in readings. We were talking a little bit at the beginning, about mediumship. Even the intuitives go for readings, and he's come through to me a lot in readings, and this is something really reassuring about that. About the continuity of life, and it doesn't have to fit in this box, that's church or temple, or it's not to diminish anyone else's experience at all by any means. But my granddad, I remember vividly when I was about 12, we had this debate, and I was angry about something, and I said, I don't want to be an Episcopalian. I'm going to go be a Methodist. I like their music better. And he just thought that was hilarious. And I didn't even really like going to church, but I had a neighbor friend that went there, and so it was fun. And he said, Libba, what if it doesn't matter what airline you take? What if it's just we're all going to get to the same destination? And I remember that now at 57. So that's just really kind of where I've come to believe.
Oh, thank you so much. Let me come in here with you. Hold on a second.
You're welcome.
Myself in here. Oh, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. What a beautiful, heartfelt, and really, I just a roller coaster that you've been through in your life, but so many wonderful things too, along with
Yeah.
mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
you know, I was curious about something you had mentioned, and if you don't mind, if you're okay talking about,
Sure.
you had said that um, you had about a year of feeling like you
Mm-hmm.
had your sister back, and
Mm-hmm.
that there was a baby, that she had a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, did you
Mm-hmm.
want to share a little more about that, or if you're not?
I can share yes, I can share in a way that honors privacy. Yes, so there was a time when we got a call that someone believed that they knew where she was, and we got that information, and she was located in a different state. This would have been back in the late 2000s, and we did get her back for a short time when she had the baby. And she had been hurt, she had been exploited, but this person that let us know that she was safe, if you want to say that, we're very, very grateful that someone cared enough to try to track her family down. And that period of time, this is something I would just speak to in general. When someone has a loved one that's on the streets, you know, finding someone, like I said, would seem like the goal, right? Finding someone's a goal. But when somebody's been on the streets, sometimes bringing them home, giving them a shower, feeding them a meal, there's so much more to it than that. it's not a matter of if they go again, it's usually a matter of when. And that's what I call the revolving door. So when I was doing advocacy work, this is how I was helping families explain to them that you really need what I would call a recovery and now what plan. You need to know what are you going to do if there are kids involved? My parents, had to get involved in that part. And ultimately, she went missing again. She wasn't well, and so she was out there, you know, um, for many years. Sometimes she was on the streets. We didn't know where she was. Sometimes she would stay with someone, and then we would know. We would have weeks of knowing, and then it would go right back to not knowing.
Mhm.
So the question that might be on everyone's mind that I don't mind talking about is, did we ever find her for good? And we did. Her body was found um, a few years ago, and a coroner in a different state who cared enough to try to figure out who she was. Again, it's like if you've ever seen that show, CSI, people are like, oh, how can you like not know who somebody is? Why would there be these John and Jane Does? There's a lot of complex answers to that, but some of the basic ones are, first of all, a person would have to have like some type of identifying information on them, like let's say an ID. So it's not uncommon for somebody that's been on the streets or in and out of shelters or jails even to have a different identification. So IDs aren't always easy to rule out, but that's typically what investigators will try to do. And then it depends on the body, if the body has uh, tissue, if the body's, if there's skeletal remains or if they're still in some state of decomposition where, fingerprints could be checked. So there's a system called APHIS, where fingerprints can sometimes be checked in the system. So if somebody's ever had their fingerprints in the system, maybe then they could be identified, but that's not ever a sure thing. So, it really takes a medical examiner or coroner who really cares to try to figure it out. We do have a lot of people that are on the streets. We do have a lot of people that are undocumented. We have people that are estranged. Maybe somebody wasn't listed as missing for whatever reason. Like I said, maybe they were a runaway. There's a really, really important reporting story right now in the LA Times about teens that are on Figueroa Street who are trafficked. I highly recommend everybody read this. It's really, really eye-opening, but it's, the same work that I was made aware of, over almost 30 years ago, but it's really time for awareness to go in a big way. But so we did get a call from a coroner, and they were able to share with us some identifying marks like tattoos and things. So at the time, the decision was made that I would go with another sibling of mine to identify her, and in a different state. So I did fly out of the state, and I identified her. And it on its own. I mean, I understand. Yes, I still grieve in my way. Right, the story didn't end the way I wanted it to,
Mhm.
but there's no doubt in my mind, none, that my sister is at peace. My sister is healed. She's happy. It's a story for another time, but I will just kind of give you something remarkable that happened. And again, if I hadn't had all these other experiences, maybe I wouldn't have been open to this. But because I did, I don't miss her signs now. It took me a while after, she was cremated, and it took me a while to make a decision. I wanted to release some of her ashes. And they were sent to us in Florida. And one morning I woke up and I said, I want to release some of these ashes, And so I asked her, and I said, where should I go? And I kept hearing sunflower field, sunflower field, sunflower field. And I'm like, okay. So my daughter and I get in our car, and I'm like looking online, where's a sunflower field near me? Like maybe, and there just happened to be like one of those places where you could go and pick sunflowers, right? And So we're driving about maybe an hour out of town. And I hear her say distinctly to me, I'm like, where can I go with these? I can't just like go release ashes in this place. And she said, you'll know when you get there. Just walk, just walk. So I'm walking. I've got some of her ashes in a Ziploc in my pocket. And I'm walking and I'm literally walking into a maze. There's like a sunflower maze. Again, I'm 5'2". Some of these sunflowers are like 7 feet tall, and I'm getting hot. I'm thinking, I'm not going to get out of here. I'm feeling kind of lost. My daughter's with me. And then I hear her say, look up. When I look up, there's a wooden post about 5 feet tall. It's got two silver metal wings on it in the middle of this field. And that's when I know that's my place. I
Mm.
took a picture of it. I release some of the ashes, and then I hear this chirping. And across the field is like an electrical line. And there's one single red cardinal sitting on the line. That's always been my sign from my granddad that I've come to understand over all these years. My granddad was a redhead. And that's how I knew. We actually used to call him red on the head. He had friends that would call him that. So, a cardinal's his sign. Anyway, my sister sent me lots of sunflower signs, and I have some of these stories in my book. But um, yeah,
That's
it's
beautiful.
really it's remarkable. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna
mhm,
ask you, have you heard from your sister? So it's so nice
yeah,
that you have,
yes,
and she's with you now, and she's part of your team.
yeah. She
I
is.
consider, yeah, part of your team
Yeah,
with your grandpa and all of your
yeah,
and everybody. So, that's wonderful that you hear from her and you know
oh
that
yeah,
she's happy and at peace now, and that
yes,
she's in such a great place. So,
yes,
and grandpa's
yes.
there and grandma, right? Grandma's there too.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Aw, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Beautiful way to end the story. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments, insights, anything you'd like to say? Beth? Hi, Beth.
Hi, I
Hey.
have the same question that I've had for a long time. How come, let me start at the beginning. I do believe what you believe. I believe that there's more,
Mhm.
and I believe that people can communicate. Why is it always so oblique?
Mm.
Why why do you always have to interpret signs and maybe
Mhm.
what does this mean or what does that mean?
Mhm.
Why don't they
Mhm.
just speak to you directly? You
I,
know?
I would I would love that, and it's a very fair question, and one I've asked myself over the years. I would say that only my understanding is that we're all individuals, just as we're all different. We're all individuals, and some of us are visual learners, right? So like when I was in a classroom, like I'm like a show me person. If you tell me something and I'm not paying attention, and I got my nose in a book, I'm not necessarily going to hear it, right? I got to write it down on the list. So I think that what I would offer back to you is an invitation to notice what you're noticing, like the things that give you a charge, like if you're a reader, or if you're a person that, like, when you hear a song, does it take you back to a memory? Because that's how I've discovered for myself. This may not be true for everyone, is that that's how spirit will communicate. Although I wish they would, tell us in a megaphone, turn left. But for me, it's been more about learning, how do I interpret information and notice what I'm noticing, you know? And, um, I think that, I mean, at the time, I didn't have anything that was really sort of guiding me. These were just sort of observations I was making on my own. And I see that someone had asked a question about the book, and this may be something that you could do. Okay, so this is a good time to maybe bring this up. This book is called 1 Month to Miracles, and it's a 30-day experience that's inviting you to notice what you're noticing. It's kind of like reflection pages, so that you can each day ask, for example, ask for a sign, and then what's coming in. Is it an intuitive nudge for you, Beth, or is it a song on the radio, or is it, wow, it's a person that I just ran into and they just happened to give me the information, right? Like I needed to get in front of Jennifer Smith. Would have been really great if I could have just gotten in front of Jennifer Smith, but I had to go through, this is my own belief, I had to go through these other experiences. I knew that I needed that. I asked for that. And then I went to this random appointment, and all of a sudden, it was a divine appointment. I got set up to get on the news, right? So the whole breadcrumb theory is maybe not as fun or clear as the megaphone. It does happen for some people that are mediums, or, they can get information a lot more clearly, but all of us are capable of receiving it, however it comes. So I don't know if that answered your question per se, but I hope
really doesn't know.
But I hope that it gave you some things to think about as to how you might come to your own.
I have had a couple of those things happen, and I just wonder why it's so hard. That's
Totally fair. Totally fair question. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking it.
Thank you. All right. And we have Maria. Let me bring Maria in. Okay. Hello, Maria.
Hi.
Hi. It's great listening to you. My question to you is, I mean, I had a family member who dropped out, and we had the similar, not even close to your situation, but it made me more sympathetic. I'm wondering how you felt. I mean, going around and seeing, I seem to trigger homeless people and notice people that look like they were, and kind of overreacted, sort of. I would go around with clothes in the back of my trunk of my car and, try to, and I usually younger, the homeless man, like young men. It was a close family member of mine. And I remember the years when we wouldn't hear from my family member, um and it seemed like I don't know what happened, but I would feel almost dutiful or obligated or something. And and then I realized it was my way of comforting myself, thinking that he might be cold and I'm helping this. But anyway, and I think it was an answer to my prayer, because I got to see him, and it was a sad thing, but we connected before he died, and that all was good. It's very difficult because you loved your sister, and I get it. And so I'm wondering, and the fact that you were able now to help so many other people in that work that you were doing, that you may not have gotten results that you wanted, but I think that you have become a pretty empathetic person this way, that people that don't suffer can be empathetic, but people that have gone through it, it's a whole different thing. And I have to tell people, when you see someone sitting at the side of the road, it's easy to pass them by, but there's somebody's child. There's somebody, and you think about, the situations. It brought all of that back.
Yeah.
And I realize now that sometimes I'm not as sympathetic, and I go by and I think, what happened? You have to be guarded. I give you a lot of credit, because when I told my sons what I was doing, they said, Mom, they could hit you over the head. I said, I'm not going into a private, I'm going where there's traffic and there are people. And if I see somebody, and they would get mad at me, Mom, you can't be that, and blah, blah, blah. And they're fooling you, or they're doing this. No matter what, there are people out there, for whatever reason. So I give you a lot. I'm glad that you made so much of your life
Well,
it's
thank
good to
you,
hear.
Maria.
Thank you.
Well, and I would just say, today I would say empathy with discernment is a good thing. And, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. And so I think from a place of understanding, really for me is where our society can find solutions, and certainly there were lots of situations I was in that were very dangerous. My parents that were in were very dangerous. And, I never condone that for anyone. It's, something that we had to learn. There was no guidebook at the time. But I think also having awareness that there's so much more going on. And no, we can't solve all the problems. And I didn't get, quote, the outcome I wanted, but I do believe, and it took a couple of years, but I did come to the knowing and belief that I was being guided to shine the light on something. And it really was just between me and God anyway, right? It's never between us and the other person. It's never between whether we give money to someone or, somebody's bothering you at the stoplight. You do have to use your own discernment. I mean, I don't stop for every homeless person, but I absolutely send blessings and love every time, because I don't
But
know what their
your
situation
sister
is.
got to know that she was cared for. What she
Absolutely.
did with that,
Yeah. Yeah.
is her
Yeah.
struggle. But it's quite an interesting story thing or
Thank you. Thank you
reality.
for
Thank
listening.
you.
I appreciate you being here, and
Okay.
I'm sorry for your own family's loss. There's nothing
Well,
easy about it.
it had it was a path that person chose
Right.
for one reason or another, but
Right.
never lacked love. So
That's right.
that's important.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Maria. All right, I see Rabbi Stephen has his hand up.
Hi, Libba.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for being
and
here.
whenever you mention signs, I got really even more interested because over the last several years, I've had a lot of signs and have come to believe in them and everything
Great.
that's involved. And I refer to them as a blessing provided to us from God.
Yes.
And that seems to make a lot of sense for me and for other people. I made so much sense that I wrote a book about it, and I'm ready to write another one about
Oh,
signs.
great.
So you mentioned the term heavenly realm. That was kind of early. So who's in the heavenly realm?
To me, that's a very subjective question. To me, who's in the heavenly realm is what I call God. To me, God is neither male nor female, really. God is an energy of love. And I believe that my grandfather is there, my grandmother. I believe that angels are there. I believe there are what I might call spirit guides. So, for me, it's Jesus. That's a conversation for another time for how I think he shows up for me. But so that's what I mean by heavenly realm, and I think that perhaps, for me, the description would be it's a dimension that exists. It's a continuity of our soul. It's the next stopping place, right?
Right.
That's how I interpret it. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds familiar to me. Because
Well,
that's
I
what
would
that's what we
love. I want to
believe.
read your book. So yeah.
What's the name of your book, Rabbi?
Embracing the Supernatural in Judaism.
Beautiful.
Signs from our deceased loved ones and stories about the world to come.
Beautiful.
Great.
Beautiful.
I
Great.
self-published it on Amazon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if anybody else has questions. All right. So does anybody else have any questions, comments, or insights? Final gratitudes. So I just want to say to you, Libba, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
There's so much. I know that your work in the world now is totally different than what you used to do.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't it amazing, right? And all of
Yes.
the ways that you help people and and it wouldn't have happened hadn't you gone
Right.
this, I mean, for every darkness there's light, and I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way when we're in it.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Yeah.
find that light, right? But then
Right.
after years, and sometimes 30 years, sometimes even longer,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
some positive things that came
Oh,
out.
absolutely. And that's my belief now is that, each one of us, even when we're facing things that are so challenging and heartbreaking, we are all uniquely equipped. Every single experience in my life has helped shape me for where I am today, and um, that's a firm knowing, that I have for myself. And again, I never diminish anyone's difficulty or things that they are challenged with, because we being on the human earth plane can be very hard. But for me, it has changed the way that I look at and how I handle everything from, whether it's a health challenge or financial challenge, or, what's going on in the world with chaos. It's knowing that I'm helped, and, if I ask, I receive guidance, and I'm not walking alone. None of us are. And
Right,
that's what makes all the difference, no matter what is being faced.
right. Ask and you shall receive, right?
Ask and you shall
This
receive. Right.
this lesson, and it's so easy to forget it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know for
Yeah.
myself, I've had so many experiences where when I ask, then I may not receive in the way I expect or want,
Right. Right. Like Beth was saying, right.
right, but I
Right.
do receive, and
Well, you
sometimes it
do.
happens so quickly, like some of the stories you were talking about when you're
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation with God, right, in your
Mm-hmm.
mind, and then boom, right then and there, the truck goes,
Right.
Jennifer Smith's picture on it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. You have to file it in the "You can't make this stuff up" folder. Yeah.
yeah,
Because it happens to all of us. It's
and
just
you
we have
can't
to notice.
there's no
Yeah.
denying it when it happens, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it's
Yes.
big and bold like that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
all right. Well, thank you so, so much, Libba.
Thank you all.
This has been so wonderful. And thank you everyone for being here. It was such a nice time together.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was
Thank
wonderful.
Thank
you.
you.
Do you want
Thank
to
you.
Thank you guys.
tell where
Thank you.
people can find you online if anybody wants to find you online?
Sure. If anyone wants to find me online, it's just my name, libbaphillips.com.
All right.
And yeah, so I really appreciate all of you being here. Been a great, great audience, and so grateful.
Well,
So
we're so
grateful.
grateful too.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Libba.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day,
Thank
everybody.
you.
You
Have a
too.
great day, everybody. Okay.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.